Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, we've got the latest update from the Texas Bowl. Ticket sales for the Red Raiders. Is fan fervor palpable? We'll get to that up ahead, an update from Chris Level. Also, back to peeling back the layers of that Texas Tech basketball onion. That's on the way, but we begin with Brett Yormark back in the building with that B.P.E, Big Pimpin' Energy, in the name of the Big 12 Conference. What does he see in the future for the Big 12? Does he go manifest destiny with his league's footprint? And how does he feel about the Rose Bowl? Very candid comments next from Brett Yormark on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Thanks for joining us again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan coming at you west of the 100th Meridian, where it's really going down. And we'd like to thank BetOnline for bringing you today's episode. BetOnline's got you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. Chris, great to be back with you, man, and kicking off today's program with Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark, who you and I have commented many times before over the last few months how much we just enjoy the show that he is providing. He's happy to discuss topics near and far, it seems, with some general candor. I'm not going to act like he's showing us all his cards, obviously. That would be silly. But he's miles away from either the experience of Bob Bowlesby or most other Power 5 commissioners. And we got a couple of things here to touch on from Brett Yormark as it pertains to his league, the future of his league, and these Rose Bowl overlords. We'll get to all that coming up in just a minute. But I really just like the fact, Chris, that you have got seemingly, and I know this seems crazy to even say out loud that you would want this in a commissioner, but you have a salesman who is selling your product. Wow. What a novel idea. He's out there with his chest out. He's out there telling people things like, quote, "We are the deepest conference in America," and it played out that way. There was a perception that this conference was defined by Texas and Oklahoma. We are bigger than two schools. Again, try that on for size. Your chief salesman selling your product like he actually believes it. And if nothing else, I appreciate that, don't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And he picks his spots. I think too, that one of the things that we have to now remember is that he's got a lot of street cred now in his back pocket because of his, comments and just commentary in general prior to the media deal. And then it happens.
Yep.
And with that, boy, there's a lot of equity that when he says something now, you have to perk up because he hasn't led you astray yet. And I don't know what it would take to burn up some of that equity. But right now, when he's talking about this or that, you certainly perk up because as he's spoken before, here's what is likely to happen. And then, boom, this is what you get. Because, we talked about that, man. Hey, if he steps in it here and he starts talking about a media deal and he starts giving you time frame and then it doesn't happen, he's not gonna start off his tenure very well. Well, lo and behold, he told you exactly what was going to happen and then delivered and in the time frame that he said it would. So no, I appreciate when he gets on the mic and says that, and he's very careful with how he words things. There's a little swag there. I think too that little East Coast, that tie knot, it's working and everything like that. So yeah, he knows what he's doing.
Does he have the dimple game on point in the tie? That's what you really need.
It's like that little teardrop right there.
Little teardrop.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, let's get to some of the other specific things that he touched on that I thought were really interesting. And of course, right now, everyone continues to be interested in the demise of the Pac-12 and the stability of the Big 12. We all know it's going to happen. Chris, I don't know if you paid any attention to conference championship game television ratings, But the Big 12 was not far off. I think maybe $1.5 million, $2 million short of equaling Pac-12 ACC rating combined. The Big 12 was much closer to the Big 10 and the SEC as compared to these other two, and that is how most metrics would have broken down for the past decade if you cared to pay attention beyond ESPN or coastal narratives. So just throw that out there. But I thought it was really interesting that Brett Yormark was obviously asked about the additions of the forthcoming members in BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, and I can never remember that fourth one. But anyway, he's excited about that coming up here
Central
this summer.
Florida.
But I thought I mentioned UCF.
Houston.
No, surely they're not being allowed in the big. They're coming. I'm going to fact check you after the show. We don't have time right now, but that doesn't seem plausible, Chris. I don't know about that. Anyway, was asked about those additions, his excitement there, but he also threw in when talking about that excitement, Chris. He says, "quote We'd love to get into that fourth time zone. We want to go coast to coast at some point in time, and we will do it." Now, that's my Manifest Destiny conference. Dream coming true. We're speaking the same language here. As I've said it, coast to coast is the way. But I got to say, I don't exactly know what he's talking about or how he's going to do it. Is it Gonzaga basketball? Is it like a California edition? How are you seeing this actually?
I can tell you if he wants to do that, he can do it right now, because if they extend an invite to Gonzaga, by everything that I hear and am told, that's what will happen. They are extremely interested in joining this thing. And again, that goes back to, I just don't know everything else. Like them by themselves, I don't know if it makes a ton of sense for you, but I mean, the groundwork has been laid. There's been multiple meetings there. I think Gonzaga is extremely interested in making that happen. But again, to me, I want to know all the other dots that you need to connect for that to make sense for a lot of reasons, financially, geographically. I mean, all those things. But I mean, this is a continued push to really put pressure on the Pac-12. You know, that's what ultimately all this is. His comments, the Gonzaga flirtation, those were all the dots are that you want to try to connect, and they are still sitting there with no media deal. I think that their commissioner, George Klavikoff, has basically said all the right things. He seems very confident in public settings. Nothing has happened yet. You don't know what's real, what isn't. But I mean, that's where the expansion is going to go. And I just don't know. I don't think anyway that's going to involve like your Boise States or San Diego States and all those things. But when you talk about getting to that other time zone, it's Gonzaga, and then what else? What else comes with it? And I just think we're kind of in a period of waiting right now to see kind of where things go and what Pac-12 schools ultimately decide to do and what numbers they're presented with from your league and others. And the interesting component too is that, Fox being involved, they've got direct knowledge of kind of everybody's media deal or kind of what's potentially being presented. So there's a lot of moving parts here, but I just appreciate the confidence that Yormark, continues to convey to everybody, because he's not really beating around the bush about it. He's telling you exactly what he wants to do and not hiding it.
He said the Gonzaga conversations were ongoing. Yep. I think I continue to be of the mind that I'm not really interested in Gonzaga. I mean, kudos to them and the program that they've built.
And you're not alone. There's a lot of people that I think agree with your sentiment there.
I continue to think about bringing them to the already best basketball conference in the nation, beating up on the Bulldogs because of being in that conference, and then their brand is what exactly? Yeah. I don't know. I'm just not real interested in that. I like more so just him talking about it, because it keeps everybody on their toes. Like, oh, what else is he thinking about? Playing basketball with a football? We don't know. You don't want to cross anything out. I do not think there is a feasible Pacific Coast or Pacific time zone addition that would bring anything to the conference. I think they would all be dilutive, not additive additions. But here's my question, Chris. You get into Mountain Time Zone, and I hope these additions come true. You're already doing it, I think, with BYU right there in the Mountain Time Zone. But Utah, the Colorado, the Arizona doesn't even keep time in that state. So I don't know what the hell zone they're in. They're in the twilight zone, I guess, as far as time is concerned. They don't play with the rest of us, which more power to them. Solidarity, brother. Would like to be there with you someday, playing golf year round till 9 at night. Either way, I'm asking you, can you just add mountain time zone teams, yet still plant a flag in a Pacific time zone window? What's wrong with playing later games in that window for a mountain time zone team? Because it's really just all about playing in that window, right? It's not like, well, only Pacific time zone schools are allowed to kick off in this window. I had never heard anything like that.
It's a great question. I don't, and he's got all those metrics. He understands what windows are worth and time slots and how many you need. But at the end of the day, this goes back to something I think you said months ago. He's just trying to destroy the Pac-12. Yeah, that's
solidarity again, brother.
I think bottom line, every bit of what he is saying here, because if he does, his league becomes that much more valuable, and that's his whole goal. He's not worried about the Pac-12 sustaining itself. Doesn't care. I mean, and if some of those pieces make my product more valuable, sorry about you, And I think in many ways, Utah is kind of the prize. That's where you want to focus. I've mentioned that before. Really? That Utah and Arizona are kind of I'm talking about the realistic options. If we want to talk about the real prizes, those are Washington and Oregon. I just don't think that's realistic.
Right,
I think they're Big Ten.
But out of those four corners, so to speak,
those four corner schools, yes, Utah and Arizona. That's where I think that's where the brands, the markets, just all the things that they would take into consideration. And we obviously just saw Utah punch their ticket to the Rose Bowl, and Arizona basketball is in the top 10, but it's not necessarily as much about that and what their programs are doing right now. It's just, because again, Utah helps BYU with a travel partner, and there's just a lot of things going on there. And I think if you get Arizona, you get Arizona State. Yeah. So there's just some things that come along with that. And Colorado has been like the redheaded stepchild of that group. I don't know if that changes because of the Deion Sanders hire. I don't know if anything, it alters your conversation or your view of them based on that hire. That would be an interesting, and I don't think you would be smart because he may be there for a year or two. Right. You don't know because they've been really bad. And there's not a lot of fan support. Their facilities lack. I mean, I don't think they carry some Denver market or anything like that. No. So anyway, but
it still remains what it was pre-prime, I think, which is, we'll take you or not, whatever, Colorado. I mean, suffer out there in the Mountain West Conference if you want to after the Pac-12 goes down, or come to the Big 12. Texas isn't here to hurt you anymore. We can tell a few departed programs, hey, Nebraska, Texas isn't here to hurt you anymore. Feel free to come on back to the Big 12 Conference. I don't know. I've seen some speculation about Utah's attractiveness being diminished because of the BYU edition already, really giving you a huge presence, and some would argue even bigger than Utah's, obviously, in the state of Utah. But I just think that matchup, that tandem, potentially too good to turn down. I mean, you'd have a great game as far as the emotion that goes there between those two schools, and I think you would love to have that in the Big 12 Conference. You mentioned the Rose Bowl because you're a professional broadcaster, and that was an incredible segue to the last thing we'll touch on from Brett Yormark, who was put off by the Rose Bowl. Speaking my language again, are we long-lost cousins? He says, quote, I don't believe in anyone putting themselves ahead of the sport. They finally realized they had to do what was best for college football. Chris, I am here eternally for shots being fired at bowl executives, specifically the granddaddy of them all.
That quote, just by itself, you know how when you screwed up as a kid and you just thought you were going to get yelled at and it was not going to be pretty, and yet what you got was from mom, dad, grandmother, granddad, whatever, it doesn't matter, and you get the whole, I'm not mad at all. I just want you to know I'm really disappointed. That's how I view that quote. That's how it's like, I'm not mad and angry at the Rose Bowl. I'm just really disappointed that you would put yourself before the sport, and that's kind of the way I viewed it. I just thought it was really funny and well stated. Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, what are we doing, guys? This is about for young people in the sport of football, and here you are looking out for your own best interest. I got to tell you, I thought you were better than that, Rose Bowl folks. But yeah, he called them out. I mean, they're not. They've always been about the granddaddy of them all. I don't mind telling you, I do love. There's something about that game and that time slot and that setting and all that stuff. But again, I'm not big into them being able to dictate anything here, and I'm glad he called their ass out on it because they deserve to be called out on it.
Yeah, and then the Rose Bowl, like kids
and
that
they
you were
buckled.
pointing to in that
I'm sorry.
situation.
I'm
they've
so
got
sorry.
to well, if it was my approach, actually, when I was a kid, you just had to then begin like you were hurt even more by their disappointment than their anger. Because I was like, oh,
Exactly.
hell, you're not mad?
It's
Disappointment? Okay, well, maybe I'm not going to get a whipping then if it's just disappointment. I've seen mad.
Yeah.
I've seen mad before. I think maybe I'll go with disappointment. Of course, you don't say that out loud. That's just word for wise to the wise for any children who are out there in the audience. Other wisdom is on deck coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. We mentioned yesterday the peeling of a basketball onion, and we will get back to Red Raider hoops coming up ahead on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Got you covered as your headquarters for stats, odds, live betting each and every game day. The easiest place to keep up with your team while keeping up with the events that you are interested in is with our friends at BetOnline. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the trends and what they're shaping up to look like this week as we hit the weekend with BetOnline, where the game starts. Joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Always appreciate being your first listen each day. And after Locked On Texas Tech, we hope you'll make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. It's the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day with Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. Chris, call me Billy Packer because I've been thinking onions for 24 hours. Did I get that reference right? Ever since you mentioned,
I think it wasn't it Bill Raftery that used to say that?
I knew it was a Bill. Bill or Billy, Raftery, Packerty.
Onions.
Yeah. You mentioned peeling back layers of this Texas Tech hoops onion on yesterday's show as we were recapping 78-71 over Nichols. And we got pretty into it yesterday about what we were seeing there that night and what we've seen so far this season. So I'm curious what peeling back the onion means to you as now we turn ahead to the next matchup.
Well, Calvin, you'd mentioned about you're starving for reserve minutes. You're trying to figure. I mean, because I think the biggest question is who your starters are, but the question is what else do you know about your team, your rotation, who's the sixth man, whatever. And I think that's just kind of spin the wheel as you're trying to figure out, what works or what will work or what you're comfortable with, what you trust. What you need. Do we need rebounding and defense? Do we need scoring? Whatever. But I think that I'm comfortable in saying, through this portion of the schedule that you've got your five starters. And I think it's fair to really wonder if you've got anything at all in Kerwin Walton and DeMaurian Williams. And I think the staff feels the same way because they're just – it's been very inconsistent. I mean, DeMaurian Williams plays, 17 minutes versus Nichols. He has 4 turnovers and a couple of points, and there's just not a lot there. Kerwin Walton is in back-to-back games where he's basically played a couple of minutes each against Georgetown and against Nichols. I mean, and it's just should be a red flashing light, like what is wrong? I mean, and they'll all tell you, I think Mark said it, he's the best shooter on the team. They've got to either do some things to get him looks but if that's all he can do, if he can't play defense and all that, he's not going to get many minutes. And if you can't have somebody consistently get into the lane and then consistently get it to him, what else can he do for you? And I think so, but I'm comfortable in saying that, like, the two guys that I really love the upside of, that I think you need to invest in and take some lumps with, are Lamar Washington and Robert Jennings. Those guys have shown that while not perfect, I'd like to kind of grow old with that duo. Elijah Fisher is a huge question mark. There was lots of questions about his recruitment, and did schools back off, and can he play, and what is he? I think Mark even phrased it like, he's it's a blessing and a curse because he's playing multiple different positions. But I still look at him and I don't know what he is. Is he a 4-man? Is he a small forward? Is he a combo guard? I just don't know. And this will sound harsh. I don't know if you have the luxury of like being real patient with players like that at this stage of where your program is at, and growing them up in 2 or 3 years. That's just, those days are over. There's way too much money being spent on the program and expectations and tickets, and the fan base wants to win and win right now. You know what I mean? And so that's it's tricky watching all this kind of go on. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you have minutes to give, understanding while they may not be perfect, I give them to Lamar and Robert Jennings, man. I mean, I really live with some of their mistakes, and am willing to be patient with those two, because with DeMaurian and Kerwin Walton, they need to be coming in as like ready-made guys, and I just don't know if we've seen that yet. And it's pretty clear the staff hasn't either, or they would be getting a lot more minutes than they would, or the minutes that they would getting in DeMaurian's case, that would be a lot more productive. And not that I'm wanting to write them off or anything like that. I'm just saying, I'm just going off of a snapshot here, but that's kind of what, I mean, if I left anybody out, I mean, KJ Allen is kind of a tweener. You just got a lot of these, like, okay, where does this piece fit type guys? And I'm looking for scoring and defense off the bench. And I knew what I was going to get last year when, you kind of had Davion coming off the bench. You knew what you were going to get, or Adonis was, or even when TJ started coming off the bench. I mean, I knew what I was getting. And right now, I think that you look down the bench and you're like, okay, not exactly sure, is this going to be a good day or bad day for this individual? And again, that's part of the process of the season. It'll look different weeks and a month from now, and certainly 2 months from now. But that's what I see at this point right now, is I just think Lamar and Robert deserve to get a lot more minutes and playing time, even though it may not be perfect, because I'd like to keep those guys in this program for a while. The others are just huge question marks. I mean, that's just, again, that's my take. You may have a different one.
No, I mean, I'll invest in your take as you're sitting there courtside taking it all in. And I really have no take, because it's all a guessing game to me. I mean, Going into last night's game, if somebody says, hey, is Lamar Washington the guy to really invest in off the bench? I'd be like, I don't know. I don't know.
you know who he
hadn't
is?
Really stood out to me until last night.
See if you remember this name. You know who he reminds me of? And he's a younger version of this. Because when I look at like Lamar, he's not necessarily going to provide you scoring. I think he's a big-bodied guard that can get other people's shots, and he's going to make good decisions more often than not. But he reminds me a lot of Deshaun Corprew, who was here in this program, a couple of years ago. The exit was a bit tricky and all that. But just, we're talking the player here. He was a big-bodied guard that I think in his best years were ahead of him, and he left the program before he got to see that. But that's what I see is somebody that is just a big-bodied guard, man, that can rebound for you. He can get to the free throw line. And again, this is a younger version of that, mind you, because this is a true freshman version of it. But that's kind of what I envision. But I mean, him getting to the free throw line 17 times and drawing, I think, 9 fouls, it just kind of speaks to the way his body's built, and him not being scared and trying to do the right thing. And he was 12 of 7. I've never seen that before, by the way. I think I looked it up in that game versus Nichols. There were, I think, about 14 or 15 players that play regularly for the Red Raiders and for the Colonels of Nichols, that play regularly, that had not shot 17 free throws on the season. Okay. And this kid attempts 17 in one game. I mean, just wild to me.
whether it's him or anybody else, I'd be glad to have anybody emerge as a consistent factor. And so I'm happy if it's Washington.
Yes.
Because like where we started this, you're starved for somebody to fill that kind of reserve role consistently.
But I thought he kind of took those minutes and he did a lot with them because there was some assists and rebounds, and I just thought his floor game was really good. His ability to get into the lane, and again, he'll get better, and it's not perfect. I'm not suggesting that, but you've got to you've got to live with some of this with some of these young guys. But I mean, some of these other guys necessarily haven't answered the bell, or they're only one thing that they're good at, and we are not good enough to showcase that, whatever it may be. I just think he's got a lot more that you like than some of the other guys at this point as you start to compare and where those minutes go. But I'm just telling you, I think Lamar and Robert off the bench and playing a lot more minutes than others is justified, in my opinion.
You've got coming up next Eastern Washington. That's Tuesday night, and then 4 days later from Houston, it'll be Jackson State. So those are the next opportunities coming up for Washington or other Red Raiders to build on what they did against Nichols at United Supermarkets Arena. And yeah, Washington's certainly he's not going to deserve less time than what he got last time out, given what he did with those 28 minutes. So good for him, and maybe that'll be something nice that will round into form for Texas Tech.
Did you see the screen that he took when I thought he was out? I mean, I think it was Manny Littles that did it, which is kind of the Colonel's foreman. He leans over there, and which I thought should have been a foul because you're not really supposed to. I think he was bracing himself, but he kind of leans over there. But man, somebody's got to say screen coming, something. Just give him a heads up. But I mean, he just hit like a ton of bricks, and I thought, well, that's the end of Lamar's night, but he stayed in there and toughed it out, man. So
did you say night or life? I wasn't sure. He's dead now.
either way. Yeah, either way.
I mean, screens are always a tricky thing. I'm always a man who's made the argument that the screener should actually have to screen me. I shouldn't have to pretend like he's screening me. If I run through that screen, shouldn't be a foul on me. Now, every ref I've encountered saw it differently, and they called me for fouls every time. But I got into a very spirited conversation once upon a time in a game with an official in Abernathy, Texas, who maybe called me for 3 different fouls running through screens. I'm like, if the dude wants to screen me, he needs to screen me. It's not my fault that we're supposed to play pretend and, I better stop here because there's a guy standing here. No, it's bone he's getting right in the sternum, and I'm dying on that hill, which is exactly the way my basketball career went. Dead. It was carried out in a body bag.
I love it. I would have loved to have seen the negotiation between you and the officials. The officials, because basketball is a nightmare to try to officiate. It's also subjective. It's like pass interference in football. What is it? I have no idea.
It is more difficult than flying to the moon. I came to that conclusion a long time ago. It's been easier for man to go to the moon than to consistently officiate basketball. And don't even get me started on the documentary I watched about Tim Donaghy the other night, whenever you throw that kind of thing in there, who screwed the Mavs out of the 2006 NBA championship. That's a different show, though. Locked On Mavs. Great show on the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech, we will wrap it up with a Texas Bowl update. Where we at ticket-wise? What were the students lining up for? Is there a new vape shop opening up on the east side of Jones Stadium? I don't know, but we'll have some explanation coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. It's Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. With Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. We're going to wrap up this here Fandangle, wrap up this here week with a Texas Bowl update, actually, Chris, because as of Monday, I was hearing some really good things about the numbers when it comes to Texas Tech's ticket allotment. Again, at the beginning of the week, I think you were like in 4,200 of 6,000, the initial allotment. You had a line of students all throughout the parking lot for tickets. Looks like there is plenty of energy, plenty of hype from a Red Raider fan perspective, at least, surrounding this bowl game. So what are you hearing as far as allotment and things like that as we head into the weekend?
Yeah, I think Bowls have an interesting, job at hand in trying to just create excitement and put a matchup together that people are going to be excited about. You want to put teams in there that they're going to buy tickets, and obviously that helps with the TV rating and all the different things that go with it. But I think that you knew that it was a foregone conclusion that the Red Raiders would sell a ton of tickets to this game, hence the reason that they were so attractive to the Texas Bowl folks. But yeah, you've sold out of your ticket allotment. That doesn't even count anybody that would have bought them from a third party or even through the bowl game itself. If you live in Houston and maybe you're a Houston Texans season ticket holder or whatever, however the NRG Stadium is set up. But I was surprised, and I got to tell you, maybe I'm forgetting. I don't remember ever there being students standing in line for bowl tickets before, ever. And I think the football staff was like, there's a long line out there. Let's go take them donuts or pizza or whatever they did. And Coach McGuire and various staff members out there just like, man, appreciate it. And I just thought
the mayor was there, of course.
Tony Bradford, great call, and right on the cusp of his announcement.
Yeah.
But I thought that just kind of shows you the excitement right now with this football program, and it fired me up, man. It's been gone for way too long, and you could just sense the buzz that is there. And then you start to get some of these announcements with some of these players returning. And I think you can start to see that it could start to get really fun around here and meaningful this offseason and certainly pointing to next season. But I'm going to be shocked because I think you helped the Texas Bowl set an attendance record in 2015 when you played LSU.
What was that number? I don't even remember. What are we looking at?
It was I think it was in the 60s or 70s. I'd have to go look up to be sure. And I don't know the breakdown of who sold what or whatever. There was a ton of Tech people there. I can tell you that. And that's when, Pat was throwing it to Jakeem Grant. You were handing off to DeAndre Washington, and LSU had a gazillion NFL guys over there. That you were just outmanning that game. But I don't know if you'll break that record, but I bet it comes close. Because I don't know what Ole Miss is doing from a ticket sales standpoint, but you could just sense the buzz. And there's going to be people that kind of in the next week or two, like, you know what, I changed my mind. Let's go. Let's change our plan. Let's go to these. Sure. Let's go to that game because there's a ton of Tech alum in Houston. I just remember being in that same stadium versus the University of Houston to open up last season, and it felt like a bowl game. And that was a meaningful game, but you had a ton of people there. I just think anytime you play in Houston or the Metroplex, man, you're just going to have a ton of support, especially when you're allowed to purchase tickets. And in this case, you are. There's no opposing athletic director that's going to throw up a roadblock anyway. They would love for you to purchase the tickets to this one. But, yeah, I'm expecting a huge crowd, a Red Raider crowd in Houston on December the 28th.
That's going to be awesome. I was having a conversation with a great Red Raider yesterday who said I think all the Texas Tech suites were already sold and that they had already made inroads on purchasing like 6 of the 10 Ole Miss suites or something that were still available. I mean, so they're loading up in red and black all the way around. 6,000. Where did I get that number from? Was that like the original university allotment to sell through them? Or how does this process now work? They go back and they request more, or how does that happen?
I think at this point, I don't know how it works from the standpoint of, but I think that there's a lot of financial stuff involved here. And I don't think you will end up asking for more tickets. You're just simply going to point people to the bowl game or your third-party vendor, which I think is StubHub. And I think Ticketmaster is who's selling tickets to the game. And you can go, I think it's the texasbowl.com or you'll be able to Google it and find it. But there's already a ton of people that I think already purchased tickets through those vendors. But these are ones just specifically bought through Texas Tech if you were a season ticket holder or the student. Because each school doesn't get a ton of tickets because they want to be able to sell their own. They also have their own. Like I said, in most of these stadiums, you have a seat license to NRG Stadium, and it's like, okay, I'm a season ticket holder for the Texans. Well, if the rodeo shows up, if the Rolling Stones show up, if the Texas Bowl shows up, I can also purchase tickets to that. There could be a variety of people that bought tickets that way. But anyway, it'll equal a huge Texas Tech crowd is what you're ultimately going to get.
Yeah, hopefully we can be back in that 60 to 70,000 range. I don't know. You never like for your bowl game to be one of your most lightly attended games of the year. Sometimes you wind up in that situation, unfortunately. But
no, that would be Ames, Iowa.
Be the case. Yeah, not going to be the case this time around. All right, man. Looking forward to a frenzied environment, and of course, we will get back to setting the table for Red Raiders and Rebels coming up on the other side of the weekend, and we'll get back to Tech Hoops as well. Make sure you are subscribed so you never miss an episode with the transfer portal wheel turning as fast and furiously as it is. Players coming, players staying, players going, whatever it might be. You want to be locked in here so you never miss an episode, because I got a feeling maybe a bonus here or there will be coming your way as we have significant news from a personnel standpoint this time of year. So plenty to be on the lookout for. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Chris, had a great week, man. Appreciate all the insights and the time.
Bang, bang, man. Hope it is alive.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're going to go with it. We're going to go with it. It is alive. Yes, yes.
Yes, sir. We're more in a football frame of mind on today's show, and we're very much hopeful and alive on that front. We'll get back to seeing what we think about Red Raider hoops next week. Let's save that for then, and have a great weekend. Hope everyone out there does as well. Thanks for joining us all week long on Locked On Texas Tech. We'll see you for the next one on Monday right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And after Locked On Texas Tech, hope you'll make Locked On Sports Today your second listen, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. He's Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. We'll see you next time around on Locked On Texas Tech.